The Star Chamber proceeding, when reclaimed in its affirmative historical sense, offers a precise and necessary mechanism for delivering justice in cases where the offenses are inherently evil, the evidence is overwhelmingly public and self-evident, and the scale of wrongdoing demands swift yet formally rigorous resolution. Far from any negative connotation, the term here describes an open, transparent courtroom process in which a judge or panel of judges, sitting without a jury, formally receives and affirms the undisputed public record of criminal acts. The defendant is brought into open court, the evidence, drawn entirely from documents, videos, mandates, congressional testimony, and public statements, is presented in full view, and the judge simply ratifies the guilt that the open record already establishes. Televised proceedings and public access ensure complete visibility. This model directly addresses the unique character of COVID crimes, which the jurisprudential framework identifies as COVID treason, COVID murder, and COVID child abuse. These offenses, classified as Malum and se, violate fundamental human dignity and moral order in ways that render ordinary protracted jury trials both impractical and philosophically inadequate. The affirmative Star Chamber model rests on the philosophical foundation that certain acts are wrong in themselves, independent of any statute. The COVID response generated crimes that centralized power, restricted constitutional rights, and produced widespread harm through mask mandates and vaccine policies. These acts were not hidden. They were openly promoted, documented, and enforced by government officials, public health bureaucrats, pharmaceutical executives, media outlets, technology platforms, hospitals, and educational administrators. Because the evidence consists of the very policies, directives, internal communications, and public appearances that the actors themselves created and disseminated, no genuine factual dispute exists. A traditional jury trial, with its lengthy voir dire, adversarial cross-examination, and extended deliberation, would serve no purpose other than delay. The Star Chamber format supplies the required formal proceeding. The defendant appears, counsel may be present, the public record is formally entered, and the judge affirms guilt on the basis of that record. This satisfies every constitutional demand for due process while eliminating the inefficiency of debating what the public already witnessed. The scale and nature of the COVID crimes further justify this streamlined public proceeding. The offenses span multiple participant categories and encompass conspiracy, direct acts, and spillover effects that collectively undermine constitutional order, caused foreseeable deaths, and inflicted medical and psychological harm on children. Each category: government officials who imposed coercive mandates, public health leaders who suppressed dissenting science, pharmaceutical companies that misrepresented safety data, media that coordinated narrative enforcement, technology platforms that censored information, hospitals that applied financially incentivized protocols, and educational administrators who enforced masking and vaccination on minors, acted in ways that are fully documented in the public domain. The open character of the crimes eliminates any need for discovery, witness contests, or jury fact-finding. A Star Chamber trial therefore moves directly from indictment to formal affirmation of guilt, ensuring that justice is neither denied nor interminably postponed. The proceeding remains fully public and televised, allowing citizens to witness the formal ratification of accountability for acts that were themselves performed in full public view. The procedural mechanics of the COVID criminal Star Chamber trials follow a clear and transparent sequence. Upon completion of the investigative compilation of the public record, which requires no covert surveillance or confessions because the evidence was openly generated, an arrest warrant issues based on that record. The defendant is brought into open court for arraignment, where the charges of COVID treason, COVID murder, or COVID child abuse are read alongside the specific underlying statutes such as deprivation of rights under color of law, fraud, conspiracy, coercion, duress, negligence, perjury, and medical malpractice. The prosecution then presents the compiled public evidence: executive orders, CDC guidance, internal emails, congressional testimony, broadcast segments, social media policies, hospital billing records, and school directives. Defense counsel may address legal questions but cannot contest the authenticity of the public documents themselves. The judge, after receiving the record, issues a formal ruling affirming guilt on the basis of the malum in se character of the acts and the self-evident nature of the evidence. Sentencing follows immediately or after a brief hearing, applying penalties calibrated to the imprescriptible status of the offenses. The entire process is televised where feasible, ensuring maximum public transparency and reinforcing the moral order that the crimes themselves attacked. This affirmative Star Chamber approach is philosophically required because the COVID crimes embody radical evil, acts that undermine the conditions for human plurality and moral reconciliation. The framework treats these offenses as transcending ordinary temporal boundaries precisely because they were committed openly and with institutional authority. A conventional jury trial would transform self-evident malum in se wrongs into a protracted spectacle, granting the perpetrators the very delay that their positions of power originally secured. The star chamber format denies that delay while preserving every formal safeguard of a courtroom. The defendant is present, evidence is presented, and judgment is rendered by a judicial authority acting under law. The public and televised nature removes any possibility of secrecy, distinguishing this proceeding from historical abuses while restoring the efficiency originally intended for cases of clear moral and legal transgression. Application to the specific offenses and participant categories demonstrates the model's fitness. Government officials face affirmation of COVID treason for power centralization through mask and vaccine mandates, with a public record of executive orders and enforcement threats serving as the sole evidence required. Public health officials receive formal conviction on COVID murder and conspiracy charges through their documented suppression of data and promotion of coercive policies. Pharmaceutical executives confront fraud and reckless endangerment findings based on regulatory filings and internal communications they themselves produced. Media, technology, hospital, and educational actors are likewise judged on the open archive of their coordinated actions. In each instance, the judge simply ratifies what the public record already establishes, imposing sentences that reflect the imprescriptible and cumulative harm across mask mandates and vaccine policies. The result is swift, certain, and publicly visible justice that matches the open character of the crimes themselves. The star chamber model ultimately restores the moral and legal order that the COVID crimes disrupted. By providing a formal, public, non-jury proceeding that affirms guilt on the basis of self-evident evidence, it fulfills the philosophical demand for perpetual accountability inherent in malum in se offenses. It eliminates the practical impossibility of impaneling juries for thousands of counts spanning years of policy, while ensuring that every COVID criminal, identified through the protected rhetorical designation, receives the formal courtroom ratification that justice requires. The televised and open nature of these trials reinforces public confidence that the system can respond efficiently to radical evil when the evidence lies in plain sight. In this way, the COVID criminal star chamber trials stand as the appropriate and necessary instrument for resolving the imprescriptible offenses of the pandemic response. Conclusion: efficient public justice models for complex policy accountability cases. The affirmative star chamber model offers a necessary and proportionate mechanism for delivering justice in the case of COVID crimes. By providing a public, transparent, and streamlined judicial proceeding in which a judge or judicial panel formally receives the self-evident public record and affirms guilt without a jury, this format directly addresses the malum in se character of the offenses. The COVID criminal star chamber trials recognize that the crimes of COVID treason, COVID murder, and COVID child abuse were committed openly through documented policies on mask mandates and vaccine enforcement. The evidence, executive orders, public statements, internal communications, congressional testimony, and institutional records, requires no contested discovery or prolonged adversarial process. The proceeding therefore serves as the formal ratification of accountability that the open nature of the acts themselves demands. This approach restores efficiency and moral clarity to the administration of justice for imprescriptible offenses. Traditional jury trials, while appropriate for disputed facts, become impractical and philosophically mismatched when applied to harms that were broadcast, legislated, and enforced in full public view. The star chamber format preserves every essential element of due process: the presence of the defendant, formal presentation of evidence, opportunity for counsel on legal questions, and public access through live proceedings and television, while eliminating unnecessary delay. It applies uniformly across all participant categories, from government officials and public health bureaucrats to pharmaceutical executives, media figures, technology platforms, hospitals, and educational administrators. In each case, the judge affirms guilt based on the undisputed public archive, then imposes sentences calibrated to the cumulative and radical nature of the offenses. Ultimately, the COVID criminal star chamber trials fulfill the philosophical and jurisprudential requirement of perpetual accountability for acts that undermine human dignity and constitutional order. By matching the open character of the crimes with an open and decisive judicial response, this model delivers swift, certain, and transparent justice. It reaffirms the moral order that the pandemic policies assaulted and ensures that the designation of COVID criminals receives its necessary formal resolution in a court of law. The Star Chamber proceeding thus stands as the appropriate instrument for resolving the self-evident imprescriptible offenses of the COVID response.